Now I request Sri Satyananda Mishra ji to present.
Respected Professor Menon and friends, coming here to attend a convention of this kind brings back many memories with many faces here known from the past. So when Mr. Vijay Sharma, the CIC, requested me at the last moment to come and speak on this, give some few comments, I won't say no. After Professor Menon's extremely lucid and very extremely educative explanation of the intent of the law and the way it is being implemented, the various stakeholders, the way they are looking at the law, including the judiciary, I think there is very little that one could add to that. There are two issues arising out of his enunciation that I would like to speak about, although I'm quite sure my friends from the civil societies, if they are present here, they were not in the morning, but if they are present here, they might, I apologize to them in advance if my comments militate against the views they might be having. You know, the name of the topic on which we are deliberating in this session is the rationalizing the scope and of the law. I presume that the intent behind the subject is that to see whether the intent, as Professor Menon was explaining, whether that intent of the law is sufficiently supported by the manner in which the law itself, unfolds in various sections and the way it is being implemented. One particular issue which Professor Menon was reading out from the preamble of the law is about that in implementing the RTI, and for that matter I think any law, one must look at the resources which would be spent in implementing the law. In fact, those of the people who in the audience who have been in the government of India would know that whenever a bill goes to the parliament, along with it, it is mandatory to send a financial statement. I'm sure that when the RTI bill was sent to the parliament, a financial statement must have been sent, and I'm sure that statement would be only listing the cost in running the CIC, or for that matter the State Information Commissions. Presumably, the people who would be making that financial statement would imagine that the rest of the information which would be given would be absolutely putting no pressure, no financial pressure on the government resources, and the only pressure on the government resources would be the salaries and the wages given to the information commissioners. I mean, that is a very extremely narrow and short-sighted view of what kind of pressure the RTI, and for that matter any law that you make, would put on the resources of the government. When the RTI began in 2005, a few thousand people had applied for information. Today, I understand that nearly 70 to 80 lakh people in India are seeking information. Imagine 10 years later, if 10 crore people would seek information, 20 crore people would seek information. So, unless the government expands radically its resources, manpower, how to deal with the 10 crore, even 1 crore information landing up in the desks of various offices? Nobody in the government, laws are made in dozen, and with the assumption that there is enough space within the government to observe any law, and its acts, and the judiciary is also infinitely capable of dealing with any number of new laws. So we keep passing new laws without really bothering about its real impact on the. So this is one aspect which needs to be really considered very seriously, both by citizens, civil society organizations, as well as those in the government, to look at the cost of RTI. how much it is. It has got many benefits. I mean, it would be very wrong on my part not to really acknowledge that. RTI is that. I have said in a small piece that I wrote in Indian Express that after India's constitution, this is the next best thing to have happened in India. There is no doubt about it. But then we have to also think what to do to minimize the pressure on the government's resources because of the unbridled or the limitless potential that this law has to encourage citizens to seek information. I mean, you just need 10 rupees. If such as I am a pensioner, whatever money I get, if I earmark 2,000 rupees every month for seeking information, I can send applications to any number of agencies seeking information. I mean, so therefore, the people would simply seek information for the sake of it. And as Professor Menon said, since we don't really know what to do with the information, we should be just happy to have a piece of paper or a bundle of papers. That is one aspect. The second one is about the role of the judiciary in the implementation of the RTI. Those friends in the various commissions should recall that the Supreme Court of India and various high courts have passed a few orders which have expanded the ambit of the Right to Information Act. It has sharpened the citizens' rights. It has clarified many issues which seemed obtuse and very vague. But it has also passed many orders which have completely truncated and shrunk the ambit of the law. For example, one order which was passed 2-3 years back in the Deshpande case, if many friends should recall, which says that all information in a disciplinary proceeding against a government servant is a personal information of that officer and therefore cannot be disclosed. Which means in one single order, now nothing relating to a disciplinary proceeding, even if it is against a person, a government official who is extremely corrupt, and the disciplinary proceeding is about his corrupt practices, this can be given. There are many such orders. I mean, that famous order which was later revoked, which I had laid down who should be appointed as an information commissioner, you would recall how devastating that order was. It is a great act of mercy that it was revoked by the Supreme Court later. You look at the RTI rules framed by various high courts. I mean, they have invented new exemptions which are not there in Section 8. Allahabad High Court initially asked for 500 rupees for a piece of information and now has reduced it to 250 rupees. But there are restrictions in many High Court rules that the information cannot be given by the CPIO unless the Chief Justice of the High Court approves of it, which means he receives an application, he would first put it up to the Chief Justice of the respective High Court to find out whether that information could be given or not given. I mean, where is that provision in the law that the CPIO has to be subjected to some other authority within the organization to decide whether an information has to be given or not? His guide should be the law, not individuals within the organization. So there are many such instances in which we used to discuss informally in the CIC how successive orders of the superior courts have really impacted the RTI. Finally, the stay orders given by the courts. Mr. Subhash Agrawal, one of the well-known RTI activists, had managed to get many favorable orders from the CIC or the Delhi High Court, but almost all those orders were eventually stayed by the Supreme Court at various stages. They were all relating to information from the Supreme Court. One such order I understand has been stayed for the last 4 years and is waiting for the Supreme Court to constitute a larger bench to decide, full bench to decide that case. I don't know whether this is priority now and will ever be considered or not. But by staying one-liner stay orders, Professor Menon was referring to Mr. Shailesh Gandhi's study. There he continuously argues that while we are expected to give speaking orders, when a matter goes to the courts, they just simply say stay. Nothing more, nothing less. I mean, just one word state. You have to understand that if they have stayed means it is well justified. I mean, because it has come from their mouths. So the ways courts have really stayed the orders of various commissions, that also has adversely impacted the ecosystem of RTI, because the public authorities, when they realize that the courts are prone to give stays, so they take the law very casually. And we have seen that routine information which the DOPT or the Cabinet Secretariat or the PMO used to give, once a stay was obtained, then they routinely would refuse any successive applications. So when we think about the Right to Information Act, my personal feeling, with apologies to the civil society activists and those who are great supporters of RTI, that it is too ambitiously drafted. It is too idealistically, it is good to be idealistic, but it is too idealistic to be drafted, and its violations and breaches are almost implicit, written into this law, that it could never be implemented in its full form, because it is not, it can't be. I mean, it is simply can't be the way information has been defined, the way public authority has been defined. We have been opposing the amendment of this law to make various expressions in it more definite, more personal. For example, in section 8, the expression personal information has not been defined at all. It is left to anybody's guess what personal is. Fiduciary, as Professor Menon was referring to, and so on. So as and when the civil society and the citizens of India think that there is a need to really give a hard and realistic look at RTI and make it, while retaining its central force, to make it more practical, I think it would be a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.